Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the March 2024 meeting of the Montgomery County Civic Federation. My name is Alan Bowser. I'm the president of the Civic Fed. I want to thank you all for joining us this evening. We're going to first disperse with some Civic Federation business, and then we'll turn it over to our distinguished guest, the Chief Administrative Officer of Montgomery County. The first order of the business is the approval of the agenda. Agenda is listed on page 2 of the newsletter. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I make a motion to approve the agenda.
Is there a second?
Seconded.
It's been first and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Thank you very much. The next order of business is the approval of the minutes from the February 12th meeting of the Civic Federation. You can find those on page 18 of the March newsletter. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from the February meeting?
So moved.
It's been moved. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Seeing no objections, the minutes from the February meeting are approved. Next order of business is the treasurer's report. We'll ask our treasurer, Jerry Garson, to make his report.
We operate on a fiscal year from July 1, 2023 through June 30th, 2024. So far this year, we've collected $1,689 worth of dues. In the last 30 days, we've had no income or expenses. Our current bank balance is $7,718. If there are any questions, let me know, either by email or now.
Thank you very much for the treasurer's report. At this point, we ask the assembled membership if anybody has any announcements they'd like to make. Does anybody have any announcements? Peggy Albert, can you unmute and make your announcement? It was so easy before. There you go. Oh, there you go.
I did it. Okay. My announcement. Karen Cordry's memorial celebration will be held on April 21st at the Rock Creek Mansion, starting at 1 p.m. till 4. There will be lunch served by Provisions Caterers. And so if you know of anyone, Alan's going to help me with this, but if you know of anyone, Rich, especially on the county council, who felt an alignment with Karen and who would wish to come, let me know. Or can I send you? Can I send you an email with those people? You know, and with the invitation, and you can send it out to appropriate people. Is that okay with you? Okay. So the one problem, and I don't know if this is a good time to bring it up, but we're collecting money to do this. The woman that holds the trust says there were no funds so designated for this event, so she won't give us any money for it. So there'll be a donation box at the door for anyone that wants to chip in pennies, nickels, dollars, I don't care. Everything will help. The bill comes to close to $7,800. And we're allowing for about 80 people at this point. If there are more, we can increase it by April 12th. But all this will be in the invitation. So I've said enough, I think. Any questions?
Well, thank you very much, Peggy. We'll send out a notice, of course, and we'll do our best to let people know about it. So thank you very much for passing on that information.
I'm going muted.
Thank you very much. At this point, I want to turn the program over to Jerry Garson to introduce our guest.
I'm Jerry Garson, the treasurer of the Civic Association. I've known Rich Madaleno since he was in the Maryland State Senate. He was an expert on budgets then. He started working later on for the Office of Management Budget, and now he's the Chief Executive Officer of the county. That means he's the #2 person in the county. I hope he's paid that well. And he's probably one of the best experts on the budget, probably knows more about the state budget that was recently released by Wes Moore. I don't know how well knowledgeable he is on the federal government budget, but on budgeting, I think he's the most expert there is. And without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Rich Madaleno.
Well, thank you, Jerry, very much for that kind introduction. And boy, my mother wasn't even on the call, so I appreciate it because I was just talking to her earlier, and I think her homeowners association failed to pay their dues. So I don't know if she was regretting not being able to join. So my apologies for that. I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully you are seeing up there. Hopefully you are seeing a slide that says 2 budgets, 1 county.
Yes, we do.
do.
Yes.
Okay, good. I was worried you were going to see just a list of files on my computer. So you've picked an interesting moment to have me come in and talk about the FY25 budget, because the county executive is going to be releasing his full budget on Thursday. So I have to be very careful about what news I break or don't during this presentation, so that I don't inadvertently scoop the boss. So, but we will be. Oh, wait a second. Hopefully you're still seeing the slide, right?
For a second, we saw the list of files on your computer.
Yes, yes.
We're okay.
I tried to
now.
move it so that, yes. I don't know. I tried to move and I didn't realize this shares a little bit differently than Teams. My apologies. So I will do my best to answer your questions and as completely as I can. But again, recognize the operating budget comes out on March 14th, this Thursday. So as you hopefully many of you on the call know, and so I'll probably move along pretty quickly. As many of you know, we have 2 budgets, like at the state level, unlike the federal government, where we have an operating budget and a capital budget. The capital budget was released on January 15th. The council is starting to work through the 6-year capital budget plan. They've had hearings and they're continuing hearings on Wednesday. So the budget that comes out on Thursday is our operating budget. It pays for the ongoing daily operations of county government, a lot of salaries. It pays for obviously everything from K through 12 to the community college, parks, recreation, picking up trash, our transportation system. So I'll get into the details in a moment about where the money comes from and where it goes to. Obviously, the capital budget is things that we're usually building, things that are going to last a number of years, if not decades. So roads, bridges, schools, the police station, a fire station, that sort of stuff. The bricks and mortar part of county government, we do a 6-year spending plan. So you can see where we are, what we plan to do over the next 6 years. We borrow money to build things, just like you borrow money to buy your house. So, obviously, we build our budget in some ways similar to how someone might build their own budget for their household. How much money you're going to come in, how much money will you be earning, what will our tax revenues look like for the next year, what we're going to spend on, what is a priority, and always looking out for your debt. The one thing I would always say is unlike an individual, a household, when you think about a county government, a state government, the county government is immortal. So if the county government isn't here any longer, there are a lot of problems where capital debt is probably not one of them. So think about yourself of, we usually borrow money for a home in a 30-year mortgage, but if you knew you were immortal, you might go for a 50-year mortgage. So think about debt from the capacity, from the perspective of not a household in this case, but as an immortal actor. So as we build any budget, again, we look at our revenue estimates, we look at all of our enrollment forecasts, primarily the school system, the community college. What are our fixed costs? We know how many employees we have. We know we have collective bargaining. We know the contracts that we have with the employees. Put in all of that money for their benefits, for their salaries. How much have we borrowed in the past? How much debt service do we have to pay? And then, of course, any new state or federal laws that we are responsible for implementing. So the budget process, as you can see, we're right here at step 5. The deadline is March 15th. The county executive has decided, because March 15th is a Friday, to go ahead and do it on a Thursday. So that's why you'll see the budget on March 14th. I'm sorry. This is so exciting, I get emotional. So sorry, I just had to sneeze there. So a little look back of where the money comes from, and this is, you're going to see almost a very similar slide. Sorry that I'm having a bit of a sneeze issue. You're going to see a very similar slide come Thursday about where the money comes from. Again, our two main revenue sources for the county: property tax, income tax. You can see they're almost identical in how much money they bring in. Intergovernmental relations is overwhelmingly state aid to go to the school system, and additional money, state aid to go to the community college, and some state aid for transportation. But overwhelmingly, intergovernmental aid is state and federal funds that are going to either the Montgomery County Public Schools or Montgomery College. Then you see in those other smaller boxes, charges for services. Many of you get your trash picked up by the county. Almost all of you get your recycling picked up by the county. So you pay a fee for those. There are a handful of other taxes. The occupancy tax, the amusement tax, the emissions and amusement tax, the telephone tax, the energy tax. There are a bunch of smaller taxes on some services. And then there's transfer and recordation taxes. Those are obviously happen when real estate transfers, or you're recording a change in the deed, like you've refinanced your mortgage. Those two revenue sources are, and have been over the last several years, the most volatile, because they swung way up in the early part of the pandemic when interest rates went way down and people suddenly had this rush to go out and buy new or to buy big homes throughout the county that had long been had not seen a lot of increase in value, and they shot up in value because people wanted to have, 3-person families wanted to have 5-bedroom homes so that they could have a guest room, home offices. So the transfer recordation taxes shot way up. And then as mortgage rates have gone way up over the last several years to rates that most home buyers haven't seen in quite some time, the transfer and recordation taxes have come down. So again, the most volatile piece of our budget at the moment. Jerry is getting so close to the screen, I'm worried that he's ready to pepper me with a question. But if there's something that you're not understanding as I go through, feel free to jump in and ask me for a clarification. Where does the money go? Not surprisingly, again, it overwhelmingly goes to education, with more than half of our operating budget going to the Montgomery County Public Schools and Montgomery College. You can see all the green shaded slices of the donut. Those are the county operations, public safety, police, fire, corrections, health and human services. Always important to remind people, we are the only county government that operates our own health and human services department. everywhere else in the state, the Department of Social Services is a state agency. If you walked in to Georges County Department of Social Services, you are walking into a state agency. Years ago in the 90s, during the Duncan administration, we decided to take on that responsibility. All the state employees were transferred to us. We get a block grant from the state in order to operate these programs. And this gives us control over the services that we provide to people in our community. It's given us a great deal of flexibility in order to deal with and provide services and assistance, even if it's on our own money, to people, no matter what their immigration status, for example. So we do something different in Montgomery County than everyone else in the state. So in some ways, we're far more similar to the District of Columbia than we are to other jurisdictions in the state of Maryland as far as the range of things that we offer. Another thing that people may not know, we're the only county in the state where the library system is actually part of the county government. In every other county, even though they might be funded by the county government, they're an independent entity like their school system. So again, a difference in the way that Montgomery County government works as opposed to the rest of the state. So we have transportation that we're responsible for. Always very important to note, we are responsible for maintaining most of the roads in the county. If you compare us to Fairfax County, because only maintains less than 10 miles of roads in Fairfax County. The state of Virginia maintains all roads in the state. So every neighborhood street in Fairfax County is a state road, whereas in Montgomery County, obviously, we have to maintain all of the roads that are not a 2 or 3 digit roadway that's operated by the state, like 355, 495, 270, 29. Those are all state roads. But other roads, Randolph Road, for example, is our responsibility. So you can see all of the different things we're responsible for paying for. And then debt service is in purple. That's the money we have to pay back on the money that we've borrowed to build things. And then finally, the contribution to the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission. So as the county executive has to make up his mind for what to spend on, it's very important to note that the public schools and the community college have the maintenance of effort law requirement under state law. So we have to put in a set amount of money based upon the enrollment of both schools. That takes up almost 55% of our budget. Obviously, debt service, you got to pay it. If you don't pay it, you create lots of problems. So we have to make our contributions to debt service. So the rest of the budget. So in any given year, a county executive really only has 32% of the budget to decide and has ultimate control over making that recommendation to the county council. And even within that, you've got the largest chunk of that expenditure would be on personnel, on salaries and benefits. So unless you want to make large changes in the number of employees, you have a lot of fixed costs. So in any given year, even though we have, sorry, I made the mistake of having some pistachios right before I started. So you wind up having, I know Peggy is laughing at me. Both Peggy's are laughing at me so with nearly $4 billion of revenues that are generated through our own taxpayers. So no, not talking about the state aid or federal aid that's always dedicated to something. Out of a $4 billion general fund budget, the county executive really, and this county executive, any county executive only has the ability to direct a third of that. And even within that third, a lot of it is in fixed costs associated with personnel. So obviously the county executive had numerous community forums. We set a record this year with 10 forums around the county. So we had one each in each of the 5 regions of the county. We had one in Spanish. We had one in Chinese. For the first time ever, we had one in Amharic. We had one aimed at the PTA Association and our education stakeholders. And then we had one aimed at senior residents in the county. So as we go through, we try to make sure what's the impact of the budget on racial equity and social justice in the county, what's the impact on climate change, and what we're trying to do to combat climate change. So I'm trying to skip forward because I think the best will be questions and answers. Here are the problems that we face moving forward. Right now, I have to say our revenues on the income tax and the property tax remain strong. Record amount in the income tax, record amount on the property tax. Property values have remained very strong, especially residential, retail. The one piece where there's been some drop off is in office valuations, but even that, only 7% of our budget is of our property tax base is offices. And, we have heard some issues about some office buildings declining in value, but as part of our overall budget, it's a small piece of our property tax. So our revenues, the property tax and the income tax, remain solid. The real estate taxes, as I mentioned, recordation, transfer taxes, those have been a roller coaster. The blueprint funding requirements, blueprint for Maryland's future is the new education formulas that the state put in place a few years ago. They are requiring a lot of additional investment. I can explain why and the concept behind it, but it will continue to drive increases in education spending at both the state and local levels. Infrastructure demands, paying for how we deal with congestion, whether that's through mass transit and or roads, how we fund infrastructure will be a large challenge moving forward. Virginia has used an approach that generates a lot of additional money for infrastructure, and I think we've all seen the amount of additional infrastructure that's been built in Northern Virginia. The county executive has been very vocal in Annapolis, around the state, and the Maryland Association of Counties that Maryland needs to come up with a plan similar to Virginia, at least just for the Washington region, if they're unwilling to deal with the rest of the state, so that we can continue to build the infrastructure that competes with Northern Virginia. And finally, recruitment and retention. Everyone knows that this has been a difficult time to hire police officers, for example. We're dealing with a triple whammy of some of you may remember during the Clinton administration, there was a federal crime bill. It put a lot of money into hiring additional police officers. Those police officers are getting to the end of their careers. During the Great Recession, out of necessity, during the Leggett administration, we did not have at least 2, I think just 2, but to save money, we did not have 2 years where we had we operated the police academy. So we did not wind up with we missed those years of having police officers graduate the academy. And then, of course, now you have a nationwide debate over policing, and that has in some ways diminished the number of people who've been wanting to go into policing. So, for example, that's our recruitment and retention challenges there. And across the board, it's, whether it's hiring teachers, hiring information technology professionals, hiring security guards, it's been a difficult time. And so recruitment and retention remains an issue. We're always fond of pointing this out. This is information from on the right-hand side from the District of Columbia's Chief Financial Officer. that across the board, we have the lowest tax burdens, except for DC, and DC's the household tax burden is driven by the fact that they have a 85-cent residential property tax compared to ours at $1.05, but they have a $1.85 commercial tax. So one of the reasons why the district is struggling right now is they had created a structure as they built up during the last 20 years where office buildings, you imagine all those office buildings along K Street, all of those office buildings were paying an enormous amount, a much higher percentage of the DC taxes. So as a result, they've had lower residential property taxes, gives them a lower tax burden. But again, the Maryland communities have a better, have a lower tax burden than the Virginia jurisdictions. And again, when you look at across the state and the TAN, we have amongst the lowest property taxes in the state. So again, this chart is from the District of Columbia's Chief Financial Officer. They do a regular study as to what are the business tax burdens. They create a sample large company and a sample small company and figure out, okay, what would you pay in taxes if this one same business was in each one of the major jurisdictions in the region? And again, we come out of the bottom with the lowest tax burden for companies. So the county executive is very fond of pointing out that even though we have continued to put money into our school system, we have yet to catch up to where we were at the peak. So when the Great Recession hit, how much money we were spending on a per pupil basis, per student basis, adjusted for inflation. So the dotted lines adjust the money for inflation, and you can see, even though in actual dollars we are spending more than we did when adjusted for inflation, we are still have to catch up to our peaks in 2009, 2010. So, and again, who spends the most per pupil? Interestingly, even though we have the largest school system sitting out on the right-hand side of the chart, when looking at the vertical comparisons, Howard County, Baltimore County spend more on a per pupil basis than we do. So, lots of different things to talk about. And at this, I think the best thing for me is going to be to stop here and answer your questions.
Well, thank you much, Rich. We appreciate your presentation as always. We look forward to the release of the FY25 recommended budget on Thursday. I'd like to remind our guests this evening that if you've got questions, please use the raise hand function as Peggy Dennis is doing now. I want to ask the first question though, and that question is, I've recently seen reports that the school enrollment is declined. It's not as much as it was in recent years, yet the money allocated to MCPS continues to increase. I understand about maintenance of evidence, but what's the thinking behind having more money going to MCPS when the number of students in the system has declined?
Sure. The number of students actually went up this year. The state changed the calculation for maintenance of effort a few years ago, that instead of doing it in any one year, it is smoothed out over 3 years. So it's an average increase over 3 years, because there was a larger dip before. Even though it's gone up this school year, actually for purposes of maintenance of effort, the total number went down slightly. So in fact, the county executive could meet the legal obligation of maintenance of effort by actually he could reduce the MCPS budget and still meet the legal obligations of maintenance of effort, because in the calculation, enrollment has gone down. But it's now total enrollment as well as the type of student. Do they qualify for services because of a limited English proficiency? Do they qualify for additional services because of their special education needs? Or do they, and the state has been trying to do this, do they qualify for additional services because of the economic circumstances of their families? So the education formula is based upon both overall enrollment and then the subgroups and what you have to do in order to match funding for those subgroups. So even within that, there is a bit of a change, but again, we could actually reduce the school system budget. You will not see that from the county executive. He will be proposing an increase in the MCPS budget, but not the type that he had proposed last year.
Thank you very much. Next question is Peggy Dennis.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Could we drill down into the DOT budget? Earlier this year, we passed a resolution asking DOT to set up a volunteer program to have volunteers go out and cut invasive vines that are killing so many of our street trees. Alan and I are both working on that. I think we'd call it a task force now. We also asked the county to appropriate more money for stump grinding and planting new trees along the roads. Have those three things gotten any specific additional allocations in their budgets for DOT?
As I tried to warn at the beginning, there are, I think you'll be happy on Thursday.
That's a good way to handle it. Thank you.
So I don't know about the vines issue. As you were talking, I was grabbing my pad of paper so that I could look into the removal of vines. We've had much conversation about the stump removal and how critical it is, obviously, to do that in order to plant more trees that will succeed. So yes, we've talked about that. Obviously, that can be costly depending upon the stump. The county executive, as you know, because many of you have worked with the county executive for many years, he's always having creative ideas about, can you drill down into the stump and plant a tree within the stump? But so, we did spend a fair amount of time talking about the whole stump removal and how important that is to have adequate stump removal in order to have successful tree replacement.
Thank you so much. Next question, Jerry Garson. You just muted yourself, Jerry. You were unmuted before.
Now I'm unmuted. In reference to your Montgomery County tax burden slide, has the county considered any changes to having different tax rates for 1 to 3 family houses, apartment houses, commercial property, and utility property, similar to what New York State has for most of the state? They enacted this type of 4 classifications of property about 25 years ago.
So I can say yes and no to that answer, Jerry. So as you may know, the state law requires every county government to have a single property tax for all classes of property, except for utility taxes or utility related properties. So we can't charge a different property tax rate on a single family home, on a townhouse, on an apartment building, on an office building, on a shopping center. It's got to be the same rate for all of those properties. So now I've not, in the conversations that I've had, I've never heard us discuss different property taxes based upon the size of the household. So I don't know how we would we would do that. And you've got me curious now to look at how New York State handles this. So I want everyone to know, if we do implement that tax, please blame Jerry or credit Jerry for that idea. But right now, the General Assembly is considering legislation at the request of the Maryland Association of Counties to give us the authority to set different rates by different classes of property. It's what municipal governments already have in the state of Maryland. It's what, obviously, as I was explaining, the District of Columbia has already, with that enormous differential between 85 cents for residential, $1.85 for commercial. And then Virginia also allows for different rates by different classes of property. So we are looking for that authority. The bill was heard a few weeks ago in the General Assembly, and we will see over the next few days what happens with it, because for those of you, and many of you on this call have been around state politics and the General Assembly, you may know this term, the crossover day. The crossover day in the General Assembly is by when the first chamber plant has to move all of its bills that it intends to pass during the session to the other chamber. So it's the day by which the legislation must cross over from one chamber to the other. That date is, I believe, next Monday. So you will see an enormous amount of legislating happening in Annapolis over the next week, because if bills do not cross over by Monday, then they are sent to the Rules Committee in the opposite chamber, and that's an additional hurdle that, unless leadership really wants something to occur, the bills can languish as a result, because there's no guarantee that they receive a hearing. If you meet crossover, the deal is, for example, all the House bills that make it to the Senate, by Monday, they will all receive a hearing in the Senate for them to then decide whether or not they want to go along with it. So we'll know over the next few days whether or not any additional taxing authority to the county governments is granted by the state legislature this year. And that might be looking at those sorts of ways to address or look at different rates for different classes of property is one of those issues that may be enacted this year.
Let me just
I'd like
follow up. Let me just follow up on that. If we don't if we don't get that local authority, what happens to transportation infrastructure in the county? I think you said that most of this money would go to transportation infrastructure if we had that. What happens if we don't get it?
Well, so twofold. The measure that is before the General Assembly from the Maryland Association of Counties, which we actively support, does say any differential rates have to be, any income raised off of differential rates, different classes of property, can only go to transportation and education. So, the county executive has said, for example, in Fairfax County, where there's an additional 12.5-cent property tax for commercial properties countywide in Fairfax County, that brings in, I believe, $60 million a year to Fairfax County, which then they can use to bond against, borrow money to pay for transportation improvements. What they do is they use that money to attract state dollars and federal dollars in for road improvements, because they don't have to pay for any operating costs associated with roads in Fairfax County. So if you were to just look at the differences in taxes in Bethesda and in Tysons, Bethesda has the $1, every property in Bethesda would pay the $1 county rate and a small urban district tax. So let's say it's $1.06 in Bethesda. In Fairfax County, where it's $1, I believe $1.10, Fairfax County is considering a 4-cent increase in their property tax, their general property tax. Then commercial properties would pay an additional 12.5 cents. Plus, everyone in Tysons is either in one of two special taxing districts, one for the first phase of the Silver Line, one for the second phase. So if you're in the second phase, that's an additional 20 cents, plus you pay a Tyson's district tax of another 4 cents. So when you add those together, that's an additional 36 cents of property tax that an office building pays in Tyson's that does not pay in Bethesda. And all of that additional money is dedicated to infrastructure enhancements like the Silver Line, like roads, like other enhancements for the Tyson's area. So right there, again, someone building the same office building in Bethesda gets a much lower tax rate in Bethesda than they do in Northern Virginia. The county executive has argued these additional taxes are necessary for transportation infrastructure. The budget is not predicated, the budget you'll see is not predicated on any of these new taxing authority passing. So it's not like Mark is going to announce, oh, the General Assembly didn't do X, so I'm pulling the plug on this project. He has been very vocal about any of the big projects that we want in Montgomery County. He talks a lot about bus rapid transit and how important that will be to augment our mass transit system in order to combat congestion, climate change, to keep us competitive with Northern Virginia, and to do it in a cost-effective manner. That's not possible without additional taxing authority.
Thank you, Jerry. We'll come back to you. We'll do Jeff
I just
Griffith.
want to clarify a point. In New York State, it applies to single-family houses, duplexes, and triplexes. It would not apply to quadplexes. And the state set it up on a county-by-county basis that they could opt into this system or keep their single rate. And it would make sense for Maryland to do that. I thank you for your time.
Thank you,
Jeff Griffith and Carrie Lamari. Jeff?
Rich, we know that half the budget goes to the school system, but the county still has very limited oversight regarding how that money is spent. Can you elaborate a bit on why that is the case, either because of current law or historically? I mean, I do understand about the minimum effort, but this goes beyond that, I think. Why that is the case and what can be done to increase the county's authority over the use of these public funds, which it appropriates.
Right. The reason for that can be complex and is built up over the decades. In some ways, it's done because of when the whole state aid, when the state decided to provide additional money to the local governments in order to make sure there was an equitable education system across the state and to offset local variations in wealth. And so I'm going back to the early 70s when this historically young guy who was Speaker of the House of Delegates, his name was Ben Cardin. That might ring a bell. When Ben Cardin was Speaker, he championed this idea. And part of the sausage making, which is the American legislative process, it was decided that, all right, the state wasn't going to put in money in order for then the counties to pull out money. So maintenance of effort was to make sure you continue to put additional money. And the state wanted to make sure the State Board of Education had broad authority to review the spending as opposed to individual counties making decisions about where money was to go or not go. So that's probably the 3-minute explanation for why, unlike in other services, local governments do not have, county governments do not have a lot of control over how that money is spent. The council can appropriate money by buckets. I think there are 8 different buckets that it can go into, but once it's in that bucket, like classroom education, the school system can't move money back and forth between the buckets, but but other than that, they have broad authority if they wanted to say we want additional money for, every elementary school to have an additional teacher. I'm being very simple and broad, that the county council and the county executive might say, great, we're going to put that money in the budget. Something happens in the meantime, and they decide, nope, we got to put those additional staff into high schools. There's no authority for the county to say, no, you didn't do, you said you were going to do X, you did Y, and we're not happy, especially because that additional authority, that additional spending becomes part of maintenance of effort for the following year. So what the Maryland Association of Counties is working, and the county executive has been very vocal about this, is trying to give us more ways to understand what's happening on an ongoing basis with the school system, to judge, in fact, how they're spending money, and try to jump into that explanation that I was giving about, an additional elementary school teacher for every elementary school, and to be able to say, at least comment when those sorts of changes are being made by the school system and the Board of Education.
Thank you very
I'll
much.
just add and close, it does sometimes feel as though we are an ATM machine for those various buckets.
Thank you, Jeff.
Yep, for every county government, the school system is the number one appropriation, I think, except maybe in Baltimore City, where public safety spending is a much higher percentage of their budget.
Next person up is Carrie Lamari. Carrie.
It's good to see you, Richard. I haven't seen you in a
Nice to
long
hear
time.
your voice, Gary.
Yeah. All too often, our council enacts programs and initiatives, but we don't revisit them a year or two later, to see whether they're working or how it's impacting other, other things. 2 years ago, we implemented a program called the tax abatement program for new construction of housing, high rises around metro stations. That encompassed 8,000 units, if my recollection is correct. And here we're a little over 2 years into it, of a 15-year program. And I know that we all have to pay for the infrastructure, the police, the fire, the schools, the sidewalks, the utility poles, everything, right? And the developers at this point are getting a free ride. Have we looked into it 2 years later now to see how it's affecting our general budget? And how does it? What's the outlook on our property tax income 5 years from now, 10 years from now? I mean, I think after 2 years, we should have a pretty good handle, don't you think, Richard?
So thank you for that question, Carrie. And of course, if you're talking about the legislation that was passed by the council over the county executive's veto, which gave a 15-year, more or less a forgiveness of property taxes for properties that are built at metro stations, right? You're talking about that one?
8,000. Yes, you're right. That's exactly what I'm talking about.
Right. The sponsors, the advocates for that bill said it could create 8,000 new units of housing. So I can tell you it's had no impact on our budget as of yet, because no use and occupancy permits have been granted yet for the one and only development that I believe is under construction right now, which is those two new buildings at the Grosvenor Metro Station, which if you go to Strathmore, they're right kind of behind the garage at WMATA. So those are the only two projects where those are the only two buildings that, to the best of my knowledge, qualify for that 15-year property tax exclusion. So again, the executive opposed it, fought against it, vetoed it. Just for full disclosure, the sponsors of the bill said, well, look, this is all property owned by WMATA, so we're not getting any property tax off of it now. So if a new building goes up, you're not losing any money because you weren't getting any money in the first place, and you've built this new housing, new people have moved in. That's additional income tax revenue for the county. So, so if you look at it from an effectiveness rate, well, it hasn't generated anything more than those two buildings. I think the advocates for that legislation would say this has been an extraordinarily difficult time to get financing to build buildings. And so if all things were equal and interest rates continue to be lower, like when they passed that bill, maybe things would be happening right now and there would be more construction, but it has certainly not sparked the type of construction at the metro stations that the sponsors of that bill had wanted. One of the things the county executive has said repeatedly, and I think it's a very interesting observation. I'm pointing this way because I'm pointing towards the Rockville Metro Station, which is to my left. There are several parking lots around the Rockville Metro Station. They've been upzoned. You can build, I think, a 25-story building there. Is anyone going to build a 5-story building there? Because, and that tax abatement, it has to be at least 8. I think it has to be at least 8 stories high. So people aren't going to build until they can get a good return on investment. And you can't charge the rents here in Rockville that you can in downtown Bethesda, for example. So that's why you see the tall build going up there.
So what you're saying is that we haven't lost money because nobody's building. And the fact of the matter is, even though we're in a housing crisis and everybody wants to upzone all of Montgomery County, and we've heard about the great need for housing, nobody's building, even when you give them free ride on taxes. Richard, I very much appreciate your response. I'd like to at least know that we're monitoring the progress of that tax abatement and how that tax abatement eventually will impact, because, we were never collecting tax on Ramada, but we never had school children from that property that were costing us. We didn't have fires that required fire departments. We didn't have need police to support the new residents for people on that property. So the argument that I think it was Mr. Reimer proposed at the 2 years ago, I think was a little bit less than, what can I say? Thank you, Richard.
And as the county executive said in his veto message, as we said in all of our testimony about the bill, we have the tools to do that already. I mean, there is a payment in lieu of taxation ability in county law. So if you notice, there is another high rise at the Grosvenor Metro Station built a few, maybe 20 years ago, that actually has a property tax, a payment in lieu of taxes there. But we actually negotiated that with the developer. So we could say, what are we getting? What are the amenities?
Exactly.
So we had all the authority to do it. The council decided in its wisdom that they wanted to make sure it was by right. So, the developer knew, all right, if I'm going to put a building right here, I'm going to have 15 years of no property tax.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Carrie Lamari. Paula, did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, this is not exactly related to the budget, but I do have a question that people have been asking about. So on Friday, Mark put out a letter that he'd written to President Biden saying he supports a ceasefire, a Gaza war ceasefire. And that same day, that afternoon, CARE, the Council on American Islamic Relations, put out a press release, and it said, CARE welcomes 3rd Maryland County to support Gaza ceasefire. And the council didn't know anything about this. They had not been consulted. And, you know, it's clear that the county does not, at the moment, hasn't discussed publicly at the county council a ceasefire, although we know it's a big issue. So will you, your office, or Mark's office put out a press release explaining that the county, that was a personal letter, although he did put it on county stationery, government stationery, that the county at this time does not support a ceasefire, and it has not been discussed by our county government.
Right. I don't know. Well, I can imagine why CARE framed it the way that they did, but what I believe the other two counties, it's not that two other counties, I think, have taken a formal position. It's the county executives of, I believe, of both Howard County and Anne Arundel County have put out very similar letters. Mark's letter, which is very similar to what Senator Van Hollen has put out, that Congressman Raskin put out, that Congressman Ivey put out, that the language that Mark used, his rationale for it, his continued insistence that every hostage be returned as an essential part of any change in the
right. So, excuse me, I understand, and we've read the letter. Many people have read the letter, and I understand what it says. The issue here is that he put it on county government stationery, and CARE chose to interpret it as saying the county supports a ceasefire. So my question is Mark or your office going to put out a press release saying at this time a ceasefire has not been discussed by the county government, and CARE is claiming incorrectly that the county supports a ceasefire? Because people were really blindsided, and from talking to council members, they were very taken aback as well. I mean, CARE is a national, as you know, a national organization, and they put out a press release like that. And is Mr. Elrich going to say this is not right? We don't
Yeah.
have a county position on ceasefire.
I can look into that. I did not know about the CARE press release, so I can look into that tomorrow and see if we can't get that clarified, that in fact it was the county executive who was expressing his opinion and not the entire. It's not a joint decision of the county government with the council, for example.
Well, I guess the odd thing
Peggy,
was
I mean,
that,
Paula,
yeah.
please, let's keep this to the budget. We know you feel
Sure.
strongly about this, but let's talk about the budget. We've got some other questions.
Sure,
one in the chat, and
understood.
we'll ask Lloyd to go next. Lloyd, you're next.
Thanks for appearing tonight. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I live just south of Bethesda, and my concern is that the local or the regional civic organization I'm in pushed maybe 5 or 6 years ago for a provision in the parks budget enabling them to spend X dollars on something that was not a specific item in the capital improvements program. We thought this was a good idea. Unfortunately, it's been abused by the Parks Department. Both at the regional, there's a proposal for Norwood Park. You may remember there was something in the capital budget on that a couple of years ago, and more recently on the Little Falls Parkway, which went before the county council on January 23rd. The county executives were concerned about both of these. My point to you is simply to use these as an example to say that that fund is being used to shove things down the throats of local people that they don't want. And for next year's budget, I am suggesting that the amount in that fund be reduced, not the parks budget, but the amount be reduced, so there is some sense, some action by parks to really listen for a change to what the local people want. It's more of a statement, and I'm not asking for anything, obviously, for this budget.
Okay, I took note of that and I will look into that.
Thank you.
I'd
Yep.
like to ask a question about public safety. Recently, people in sort of down county Silver Spring were concerned when the Starbucks on Ellsworth Drive said it was going to close at the end of the month. And one of the reasons listed was public safety. Residents down here have raised questions with the third district over and over again about aggravated assaults, about carjackings, about retail theft. You mentioned during your presentation that we were having trouble recruiting and retaining MCPD officers. I know they've made a commitment to use some more technology to compensate for the fewer number of officers. Are there high level discussions between your offices, MCPD, and the county council about increasing the use of technology, more drones, more closed circuit televisions in the urban areas that include Wheaton, I guess Bethesda? And can you say anything about a plan to put closed circuit televisions in the parking garages?
So as you know, the county executive has proposed a supplemental appropriation, which is an increased authority to spend money in the current fiscal year in order to wire and put in a much improved and more extensive camera system throughout the parking garages in Silver Spring, Wheaton, and Bethesda, including all of the stairwells. So we are moving down that path. I think the council actually, I believe, approved that last week. So we are moving forward with those improvements. We have the drone as a first responder working in Silver Spring and Wheaton. I think you will see a proposal to expand that and expand the hours. We are using Live 911, which is a technology of, instead of right now, you call 911, information populates the field, a call taker is taking information and then referring it to the police officer. What Live 911 does is, if it recognizes using enhanced technological abilities, I don't want to call it necessarily artificial intelligence, but it recognizes certain calls that are coming in and then immediately brings whether it's the drone operator or a nearby police officer into the call so that they can hear what's happening directly from the caller, so that I'm not depending upon you, Alan, as the 911 operator to refer what exactly is happening. You can hear directly from the caller the information that's being relayed in order to both get to the site quicker and ideally have a better understanding of what they're walking into, because they're hearing the description of the caller. We have put out more, and I think you'll see more funding for license plate readers, for additional cameras, helping businesses and residents get cameras. We've stood up a crime information center where at the police headquarters, people are monitoring the camera feeds so that they can immediately, if they hear of something, if a car triggers the license plate reader, they can start using the cameras to try to direct the police to responding, especially if they're outside of the drone coverage areas, which are relatively limited because of the sensitive airspace that they have to cover. So the federal budget that just passed, I know the combination of Congressman Raskin, Senator Cardin, Senator Van Hollen got us $963 million for a new crime information management system to augment that. We just completed our first successful grant for many years to get $500,000 from the federal government for a new ballistic testing system and a new fiber testing system. So it will give us the ability. I joke, if you're interested in a new spinoff of CSI Rockville, we will have enhanced capability to look at the evidence that we collect at scenes. So we are doing a lot with adding technology to make things to keep our public safety officers safe and to increase our ability to solve crimes, fight crimes, prevent crimes. Now, on that Starbucks location, I would point out to everybody, it was one of the baristas who said the reason that they were closing is because of crime. Starbucks, the lease on that facility or that location is coming up. And Starbucks just opened a store double the size at the shopping center at the Blairs. So at, right there by East West Highway and Colesville Road. So they've put in, Starbucks invested a whole bunch of additional money into a much larger store in downtown Silver Spring. So it's, they've not communicated to us that was the reason, that public safety was the reason, but trust me, the county executive has directed us to go out and reach out to Starbucks, understand exactly what was happening, try to, if there is the ability to correct the record, if need be, to correct the record. So it is frustrating the way the news has spread this way, that, they found someone that, again, a low-level employee of Starbucks who characterized it the way he heard it or she heard it. And that has created a narrative around that location when in fact their lease is up. They opened a much bigger store and they decided not to keep that location open.
Well, thank you. We appreciate that clarification. People, if you have questions, put them in the chat. I'm going to refer to one right now, or raise your hand with the raise hand function. And mine's a question about housing policy in the county. When we had the county executive as a guest in January, he made mention to a policy called housing for everybody. I think that was how he characterized it. Does the county have a new policy called housing for all? I know that the county executive was interested in preservation of the existing affordable housing, some changes to the MPDU programs, co-location of housing on some public properties. Do you have a more fulsome, robust housing policy that's somehow going to be reflected in the new budget? If you can.
I mean, as you may know, the county's efforts around housing finance have gained national attention for the type of funding we're putting into the Housing Opportunities Commission and our willingness to partner with private developers. So you will see additional money for housing. I don't think I haven't heard it described as housing for all. I think I would have remembered that slogan. So, but you will see additional funding as the county executive proposed in the capital budget. You'll see some additional money in the operating budget just for trying to create additional housing in the county.
Thank you. Chris Reynolds is asking, perhaps
I
not
saw
on.
that.
Okay.
Yeah. So asking about the noise ordinance, when it comes to street preachers, I know, I drive often Veers Mill Road, and at the corner of Veers Mill and Randolph, there's someone who's often amplifying and shouting at that corner in Spanish, but what can I only assume is trying to evangelize there. There are some limitations about the fact that they're doing it in the public right away, how far we can go to limit that behavior. My understanding is we've gone out there and looked at the amplification, and I don't I don't think it, as annoying as it might be, I don't think it is loud enough to actually trigger a violation of the noise ordinance. I know, Chris, if you are a Silver Spring resident, our Silver Spring Regional Services Director, Jacob Newman, and the team there have done a lot of work and around this issue. And I think if you're interested for more information specifically about that issue, that Jacob is the subject matter expert that would give you the most comprehensive answer.
Thank you, Chris, for that question. I have another question. People, if you've got questions, we can talk to Rich while we have him, and he'll answer everything. I want to ask a question about the bus rapid transit program. So some of us have been on advisory groups from the state and from the county for 10 years now, as they made plans to, the state backed out of bus rapid transit as their project. County picked it up. I was wondering, has anybody given any thought about the bus rapid transit on Georgia Avenue, at least up as far as Leisure World? Seems to me major thoroughfare and lots of people along that artery who could benefit from bus rapid transit up there, and it's sort of strangely absent from county's plans.
So, sorry, I was trying to pull up the bus rapid transit map. We have a wonderful page on our county website. And of course, I'm doing a wonderful job of finding it right now. So, as you may know, we've laid out a plan for a mass transit system that operates across the county government, across the county. We are moving along steadily with the first line, which would run mainly along Veers Mill Road from the Wheaton Metro Station to the Rockville Metro Station to the Montgomery College Rockville campus. So that line is the farthest along. Obviously, we've got the Flash line running from Burtonsville to Silver Spring. It doesn't have the same level of dedicated service that the county executive wants out of the vision of bus rapid transit, because it should be traveling in dedicated lanes. So we are moving. We are trying to move forward as quickly as possible with BRT to try to get the state's engagement in BRT, and we're trying to clarify some funding that the state promised us in order to actually be able to bond against that additional state aid. So, but Alan, I forget which segment were you saying we should move forward with?
Georgia Avenue. From downtown Silver Spring. I think there was some community pushback for having it going all the way to Olney, but I was wondering whether or not anybody had thought about having it on Georgia Avenue through Glenmont up towards Leisure World.
Right. That is within the plans. Our priorities right now are the Veers Mill Road, the 355 from literally Clarksburg all the way down to Friendship Heights, although that's in 3 different segments between North, Mid, and South. The Georgia Avenue piece is on the drawing board, but that is not one of the higher level priorities.
Okay, I appreciate it. I know that Jerry Garson's got some thoughts about this, and there's a couple of questions in the chat you might want to look at. Jerry Garson, you're muted.
I'm now unmuted. We've seen that there's been very little ridership on the BRT on 29. We see that the average number of riders was 10.8 riders per trip. We see on the extra between Lake Forest and Medical Center, only 8.5 riders per trip. We could provide free mass transit for the next 30 or 40 years for the amount of money we're spending on BRT. I think most poor people would rather have free ride-on service for the next 20, 30 years rather than having this BRT, which is extremely expensive and probably will not generate any significant number of riders per trip. In fact, the amount of pollution caused by each bus exceeds what a small minivan would produce. Do you have any comments on that?
Wow, Jerry.
That's a long-held position of the Civic Fed for free ride-on. So now the county executive has some issues with it, but Rich, go ahead.
So I think the county executive would say that one of the problems with the Flash system is it's not a true BRT. While it has limited stops and some of the features, the physical features of BRT, of making it easy for people to get on, off, pay, without the standard entrance and exiting of a bus, that it does not provide because without dedicated lanes, it doesn't provide the same assist of moving quickly that you would get out of a dedicated lane. So the time incentive to use BRT, the Flash system on 29, has not been realized. And that if you were sitting there looking at a system that moved on a rapid manner because of the ability to either have dedicated lanes or queue jumping, a variety of things that are that allow a bus to move quicker, especially a BRT vehicle, you would see the enhanced ridership, because that is definitely the way things have worked in other communities. If you look at Cleveland, if you look at Toronto, with new lines in place, if you look in other places around the world, people use buses and bus rapid transit. And if you're going to invest in transit, it is so much cheaper to do bus rapid transit than it is to enhance any rail function. So as you can see in the length of time and the cost of building the Purple Line.
Thank you. Thank you
Well,
very
we
much.
see the Purple Line is fully in operation right now. Or we're supposed to be.
Yes, it was supposed to be completed in 2022, may not be completed until 2018, and $5 billion over a budget, which thank you for that thought, Jerry. I want to ask Rich this question. One of the governor's initiatives for this legislative session is proposing a housing policy that one component of which supports tenants, one supports, I guess, subsidies, and one supports circumventing local zoning, land use and planning rules. Wondering if the county government has got a position on the government's how the governor's housing affordability plan.
So we have been working with our partners in HOC, our partners in the Park and Planning Commission, because of planning's role, to try to lay out amendments that would address some of the issues that we have fought for in this county, and to continue to respect the local decision-making authority that we have had. So I am not the subject matter expert on that, Alan. I will happily get you the county government's position statements on those three bills if you think that would be helpful.
It would be helpful. I appreciate you offering to do that. One of the things that we focused on over the course of the last 10 years is development in East County, Viva White Oak. There's been substantial developments and changes in around Burtonsville. Can you characterize sort of the East County sort of housing and business environment? Is it getting better? Are people interested in investing there? Is Viva White Oak moving forward with any kind of seriousness?
Sorry, I was just trying to put down notes. The county executive is very excited about the new development partner that has been brought in about Viva White Oak, MCB. MCB is the company that is a Maryland-based company that is, for example, working on the redevelopment of the Inner Harbor in Baltimore. They have been aggressive at trying to understand more about the community, about laying out a plan. So I think the county executive feels like this is the most effort and interest and excitement over the Viva White Oak complex that we've seen in years. So you may know that the Montgomery College will soon be having a ribbon cutting for its East County campus. Right now, it's going to be one facility in a rented out space to start offering classes and other services in the East County. The vision is a multi-building campus, much like Germantown. So that final location has not been determined, but the county executive has pushed and prodded and succeeded in getting the college, the state, and the county council interested in moving forward with that fourth campus, bringing in very needed services over there. We've been in a lot of conversations about ways that you can, what programs could be added there that would enhance the workforce needs in that corridor, especially in health-related fields, with the White Oak Adventist Hospital being right there and having a large need for trained health professionals. As you know, great progress at the Burtonsville. It's a Burtonsville crossing with the opening of Sprouts. Other stores announcing that they're moving in that complex. So that long abandoned shopping center on the east side of 29 in Burtonsville is showing signs of great rebirth, which is very exciting for us to move forward, and opens the door for additional housing opportunities up there. As you go down the corridor, several new shopping areas are moving forward. The White Oak Town Center complex with I believe what is going to go, an Amazon Fresh. There are several new grocery stores as anchors in the East County, and trust me, grocery stores are the most successful anchor tenant to a shopping center. So when you look across the county where you have grocery stores, you have a number of other stores that fill in around a grocery store because of the amount of foot traffic that goes into grocery stores. So the excitement in the East County with a number of these developments going all the way down to the Hillendale Gateway project right there at New Hampshire Avenue and the Beltway, that you see a lot of growth occurring. The county executive is always pushing and prodding people about ways to do creative things at the White Oak Shopping Center, especially with the old Sears building. So we are working aggressively to bring development and development opportunities in the East County. I hope that was helpful, Alan.
That was perfectly helpful. I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about the success that the administration's had in sort of East County, because there has been a lot. I don't see a lot of questions in the chat. Maybe this will be the last question as we approach 9 o'clock. And that question is, has anybody given a serious thought about helping first responders secure housing in the county. I mean, we've heard some horror stories about police officers who live in Delaware and Gettysburg, and who have to travel 2.5 hours each way while they're on duty. And we suggested to the chief at the last meeting, I think we had the retiring chief in December, that you could provide a stipend, you could provide some kind of support for first responders and teachers to live in the county and help them with their rental payments. Is anybody, I know that Councilmember Hucker tried to do a tax credit for first responders. I wonder if any of those conversations had advanced over the course of the last couple of years.
So that legislation was successful. So we do have a program that allows that provides a tax credit for firefighters, first responders in the county. So that is already part of the law. We've talked about how do you create workforce housing for whether it's police, firefighters, teachers. It's an interesting idea of what do you do for people in those job classes? Do you provide just subsidized rental housing? Is there an ownership component? How do you potentially get people interested in living in the county who are working for the county? So that is something that we wrestle with all the time.
I appreciate the answer to that question. Does anybody else have any other questions for our Chief Administrative Officer before we thank him for his time and
I
say
have
goodnight?
one.
Who
I
is
have
that?
one.
And please go ahead, ask the question.
Carrie.
ahead, Carrie.
Rich, and I'm just curious on this. The Montrose Parkway has been on the books for almost 50 years. It was on the CIP, ready for, it should have been built, I think, in 2009. I can't remember at this point. And it has a lot of good positive attributes. It reduces traffic on Randolph, reduces traffic on Twinbrook. It creates transit options on Randolph Road. It addresses the most states. The state has indicated that, the grade separated, at-grade railroad crossing on Randolph Road is one of the most it is the most dangerous railroad crossing in the state. I know Mark's not a fan of it. There's no question. But is it still possible to come to fruition, or is it dead at this point? I'm just curious, Richard.
So it's not dead. There are, so as the state legislator who represented that area, I know a little bit about the project. There are some very interesting engineering challenges that are created by building a grade, by having Randolph Road, Montrose Parkway, whatever you want to call it, go over the train tracks as opposed to the at grade. And part of it is, the topography. It has the road going from the Pike to Park Lawn Nicholson. It goes downhill, which means as you build an overpass, the amount of space that is needed for it to come all the way down brings it much closer to Park Lawn Nicholson. And if you were to, you would have to take out a lot of businesses if you wanted to build it along kind of the current right of way of Randolph, Montrose, right there. Or you run it as I think the master plan design has it going, across, and I believe across Park Lawn. I don't think it doesn't even come down at Park Lawn Nicholson. It continues above and then runs all the way over to Veers Mill Road, following kind of parallel to what Turkey Branch, and coming out at Veers Mill and Gaynor, which would mean, most traffic on Randolph Road would then have to turn, if you wanted to follow that path, you would turn going westbound, you turn right from Randolph onto Veers Mill and then turn left onto onto the Parkway. So it's a complex engineering problem.
Well, it was designed though, and it was ready to go forward. Unfortunately, that it was killed 2 years ago, I'm sorry, about 4 years ago. So,
I don't think the state ever put in the money, because this is not a county that the crossing over the railroad tracks is supposed to be done by the state. So with the rest of the roadway done by the county. So I don't ever remember the state having the money put aside to build the overpass.
Well, the county had it in the 6-year CIP, and Roger Berliner actually took it out. Nancy Florine and George Leventhal supported it, and Ike Leggett said, "Okay, well, we'll take it out for 2 years." Just before Mark, was elected, and then when Mark was elected, he took it out completely and never put it back. So I'm just curious: is it ever going to get put back into the CIP, or is it? And look, if it's dead, it's dead. But I'd like to know if it's dead. That's all.
I have not heard it discussed in a few years. So,
maybe somebody should start talking about it again.
I think the desire to not have it run all the way to Veers Mill creates a range of engineering problems that can be quite costly to try to solve.
So I've got a final question. I thought that we had the final question, but I made a list, as you can tell. And one of the questions is, can we ever expect Montgomery County to support beer and wine sales in supermarkets? Lots of people, mention that. Lots of people travel to DC to go to the Safeway on Piney Branch Road, where there's a really impressive selection of beer and wines for the public. I wonder, it's come up for the last 20 years, and I'm wondering whether or not there's been conversations about that.
So the inability to sell beer and wine in grocery stores is a statewide state law. So that has nothing to do with Montgomery County's unique and highly successful alcoholic beverage service system. We could easily supply beer and wine to grocery stores, just like we supply beer and wine to privately operated beer and wine stores throughout the county. So for a variety of reasons, the state legislature has consistently blocked attempts to allow grocery stores, supermarkets, anyone, David Trone and Total Wine, to have more than 2 licenses. So I believe if you go to the Safeway in Olney, they sell beer and wine because they can have a license. I think the 7-Eleven on Georgia Avenue in Aspinall, Georgia and Randolph has beer. Georgia and Connecticut has beer, so it can be done. The limitations apply statewide in state law, so it's not something. It's it's not something we as a county government have any control over. And I think that's, to me, it's always been the most fascinating thing is I think what people want is the ability to buy beer and wine in grocery stores because they see that so many other places. They're from other communities that have that, and they vacation in places that have that. And they get frustrated that they think the county government is preventing that from occurring, when in fact, that is a statewide state law that would need to be changed. And for a variety of reasons, the General Assembly never moves forward with taking up that proposal, even though it is put in on a regular, if not annual basis.
I was wondering if the county would be supportive of that change. I know that arguments have come up that they need the revenue that goes to the Department of Liquor for bonding for other things. I wonder if the county would be supportive of that change in policy.
It would. I mean, the funny thing is, you did that again. That's what I was trying to say. It wouldn't affect our revenue, our alcoholic beverage system, because we would just supply the beer and wine to the grocery stores, just like we supply them to other stores. So it does not take away from our ability to generate revenue through what is now called the Alcoholic Beverage Service, not the Department of Liquor Control. So there is no, it wouldn't create a problem for us to do that. So that's why, again, I think people misdirect their frustration that beer and wine isn't sold in grocery stores because of something that the county government is doing, when in fact, that is a longstanding, decades-old statewide state law that probably garners more opposition amongst legislators in other parts of the state than it does in Montgomery County. I mean, I've tried to say to people, hey, why don't we find a way to let's partner with Giant to open a Montgomery County beer and wine store in the middle of the Giant, if that's what we need to do in order to satisfy this need. Now, what I've been told is because Maryland laws are so specific about who has access to beer and wine, that minors couldn't be moving through the store, that you'd have to create a way for them to monitor who's buying, who's not. So that's why we've tried, if you look at, especially our new stores, we are trying to put our county stores near grocery stores so that people can get their distilled spirits. When you look at all of our new stores, we try not to carry beer. We carry limited selection of beer so that people can go to the private beer stores, even though we supply the beer to those stores, and wine is a bit of a mix. So again, I don't think we would have any problem with it because it wouldn't diminish our revenues. In fact, it would probably increase the amount of revenue coming into the county because there'd just be more opportunity for people to buy beer and wine.
Well, thank you. People asked about that.
That is an issue. That is an issue to direct to state legislators and ask them, hey, why don't we change this statewide state law, limiting the number of licenses and limiting the ability of grocery stores to sell?
Yeah, people ask that question all the time. And I guess a final question would be, does the county executive still have, does he still support the idea of an office of people's counsel?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so that's good to know. We've been working with some of our state partners to try to get that established in a different configuration, but we need to keep pushing on it because the Civic Federation feels very strongly that that's an important function for to help neighbors. And so it looks like
the county executive's commitment to that issue has not diminished.
Thank you. Peggy Dennis, you get the final word.
I just wanted to say, Rich, I'm so glad you survived your pistachio attack.
So thank you. Thank you.
Well, thank you,
I'm glad I survived too. That's
Jerry Garson. You have a question?
No, no, I don't have a question. I just want to thank Rich Madaleno, who seems the most expert person on discussing the budget. I think you had knowledge of almost every question that was answered. We've had predecessors to you discussing the budget, but didn't have anywhere near the number of answers that you were able to provide us with. And we want to thank you for doing an excellent job.
well, thank you. That's very kind of you, Jerry. Thank you all for your continued engagement in working to improve Montgomery County for everybody.
Thank you so much, Rich.
And I look forward to getting the information from Peggy Dennis. No, the other Peggy. Sorry.
Maybe Alpert.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you very much. Our regards to the county executive.
Okay. Have a great evening, everybody.
Thank you so much. I hope everybody enjoyed the conversation with the Chief Administrative Officer, Rich Madaleno. He's been generous with his time over the last many years. Usually we have this conversation after the operating budget is released and he can be more specific, but I think he gave us lots of insights and clues about what we'll see in this the FY25 recommended budget. Now at a time where we're going to go through our committee issues and see if anybody has anything they want to discuss about the following areas: education, environment, land use and planning, legislation, transportation, public finance, and public safety. The first committee that we have alphabetically is, we'll get to you, Peggy, in a second. The first committee that we have alphabetically is education. And so I want to personally extend my thanks and appreciation to the representatives of the Montgomery County Taxpayers League and the Parents Coalition for facilitating a very interesting conversation about the FY25 school budget. Thank you very much for Paula for bringing that to our attention and involving us. And I think I saw Esther joining the call, and thank you, Esther, for your hard work in making that happen. Anybody else have anything you'd like to say about education? Peggy.
Yeah, can I just,
Paula.
right, I just want to say, yeah, the Budget Palooza was really great, and we wanted to appreciate and say thank you, Alan, and the Civic Fed for co-sponsoring. And it was recorded, and I know Esther put it on Twitter, and I'm not sure if you guys have copies of the link or not, or how we can get that to the members. But thank you again so much. It was really helpful, I think, to go through the budget like that.
And Esther, I'm not sure if I posted the link on our social media. If you can send it to me, I'd be happy to share that with the group. Anybody have anything else they'd like to say about education? Okay, our next committee is the environment. Anybody have any environmental issues they'd like to share with us or bring to our attention? I saw that Sheldon was on the call, and I know he follows this issue that I'm going to mention very carefully, and that's the chain of custody for artificial turf. Sheldon, are you available to just give us an update of where that issue is? That's been one of our top priorities for the last few years.
Yes, the chain of custody bill addresses an important issue, which is where are the artificial turf fields right now, and after their and reach their end of life after about 8 years, where are they disposed in the state? And nobody knows that answer. The Sierra Club got a bunch of volunteers, and they found 430 artificial turf fields. So it's a significant issue. The bill is HB 457, which requires, it's very simple, and it just says that if you, when you install a synthetic turf field, you have to report to the Department of the Environment where you installed it, and when you when you have it removed, you have to report where it was removed to. And the bill made it through the Environmental Transportation Committee, and it made it through the entire House last week. So it will be going over crossover to the EEE committee in the Senate as soon after crossover, which is chaired by Brian Feldman, and the vice chair is
Cheryl Kagan.
Yeah, Cheryl Kagan. And we we hoped that it will make it through this year. The problem last year was, and it's basically the same bill, is that the president of the Senate, Ferguson, did not allow the committee to vote, and never brought it to the Senate floor. And we're hoping that we can persuade him otherwise this year. And if anybody knows President Ferguson and can whisper into his ear, we would be very appreciative.
Thank you, Sheldon,
There's a
for that.
second,
Yeah,
there's a second
Sheldon?
bill. Yes,
go ahead.
there's a second bill, which is not sports fields, but playgrounds, the youngest kids. And it's the same issue. Excuse me, a similar issue, and it's toxic materials in the playground, in particular lead that's been added, and PFAS, and that is at a hearing on the House side.
Sounds
And
like
I'll
you
put
had
the
some of
bill-
those pistachios as well.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I'll put a link to the bill in the chat.
Okay, thank you very much for that update. I happened to be in the gallery in the House a few weeks ago when Delegate Linda Foley was very effectively advocating for the chain of custody for the artificial turf bill. So we owe her a round of applause for that. I saw something interesting today just on the environment. This is one of my favorite cluster of issues, was that the governor had suggested a broad program, an aggressive program for facilitating data centers in Maryland. Some of you have probably seen them in Northern Virginia, where they seem to be everywhere. They're gigantic and they're along the highways. Some of the most significant environmental organizations in Maryland have stepped up to oppose the governor's plan for more data centers, saying that there's a lot of impervious services, they have greenhouse gas emissions, and that they're bad for the environment. So stay tuned for that. We haven't taken a position on that. When we started talking about our priorities, the data center bill was not on the table. Anybody else have anything on environmental issues they want to raise? Next thing is one of our favorites, land use and planning. And I'd like to, those of you who were on the call last February, in the wee hours of the morning, we started having a conversation of a bill that was introduced by David Moon and supported for some reason by the delegates from the D20 delegation. After a conversation, we decided as a group to send a letter to the members of the state delegation asking them to table the bill MC 8-24, now HR 1300. We wrote that letter, and the final paragraph was, after considerable discussion, members voted to request that the delegation table this bill until the 2025 legislative session, providing members of the delegation an opportunity to have a full discussion of the issues involved so that the community might understand the intent and likely impacts of legislation such as this. So we sent that to them immediately, and they didn't pay any attention to it. Carrie Lamar, you have a comment?
Yes, the Attainable Housing Initiative is back on its on the agenda. The planning staff is going around communities and giving presentations on the attainable housing on upzoning. I don't know if there's been any changes to it. I know the Federation, we don't have anybody involved in that anymore that I'm aware of. We should, and we need to know where this is heading. That's all.
Thank you, Carrie. Lisa Gavoni, the staff person at Park and Planning, the Planning Department, made a presentation before the Planning Board 2 Thursdays ago. I listened to it, 2-hour presentation. We're trying to get it's right now part of a 5-hour Planning Board video. We're trying to get them to cut out the 2 hours of relevant, as well as to provide us with the current draft that well, we have slides, or we've seen slides, and a copy of her presentation before the board. I'm going to, and we're going to make that available. I'd ask everybody to look at the attainable housing presentation to see what their current thinking is and to get your thoughts about it. Paul, did you have a comment or question about any of the issues so far?
Well, so yeah, you were asking about 824. So for those that don't know, the hearing on that in the House Environment and Transportation Committee was today, this afternoon, from 1 to 4. So I haven't heard anything about what happened with that bill, but that was the first hearing in the House on HB 1300, formerly known as 824.
And that was before.
Alan, have you posted on the Civic Fed website, or can I get a copy of the letter that you wrote?
It's on the Facebook page. I don't know that it's on the website yet.
Yeah, I didn't find it on the website. So if you could either send it to me or, but anyway, that's the update. As far as I know, I haven't been able to find anything about what happened this afternoon. Maybe it'll be posted tomorrow, or maybe it'll be updated in the daily listings.
Thanks, Paul. We've been kind of following that, and at the last delegation meeting, the bill moved out of the it was recommended for moving forward by the delegation. And as I remember correctly, Delegate Corman had some serious issues with them and talked about having a deep dive into that particular bill at the full committee. Full committee.
If I can add to that, they basically, all the smart money is that it's unconstitutional. The bill is. They've couched this bill as being a civil rights bill, but from what I understand, all of the racial equity, social justice people that have reviewed it say that it'll have more impact to people who in the affordability aspect of housing than benefited, and it has no relationship to the Civil Rights Act that that we know about that restricts the sale of housing. I mean, they've couched it in such a way where it just doesn't fit. So I have a hard time believing the state of Maryland will pass this. If they do, I think it'll be challenged. That's my opinion.
I agree with you, Carrie. Let me ask Cheryl Gannon and Liz Joyce, she's still on the call, if they want to just give a status report on the work that they're doing around housing issues for ultimate presentation to the Federation delegates. Cheryl, can you say something about the work that your committee is doing?
We have a work group, and we are trying to come up with a new policy statement on housing to be endorsed by the Federation. And there is a diversity of viewpoints on the committee, but we are working our way through the issues to find as many areas of common ground as we can. We were supposed to meet this week. I'm waiting for a rewrite of some areas from a couple of people So we probably won't meet until next week, hoping to have something this spring before summer starts for the Federation to consider.
Thank you very much for that update. Liz, are you on call? I'm not seeing her. One of the other issues that we've been following very carefully is the Kramer bill, proposing the establishment of an Office of the People's Council and MNC PPC, like they have in Prince George's County. Kramer introduced that bill at the beginning of the session. It went to the Montgomery County House delegation, which has had several hearings and conversations about it. From what we saw, what we know, they gutted the bill. And so it doesn't look anything like Kramer's original proposal. We had asked simply that Montgomery County residents had the same resources provided to them that Prince George's County has provided through them via MNC PPC. That bill moved forward. It was passed by the House delegation with only a couple of objections, Pam Queen and Greg Wims, and I think Leslie Lopez. At the end of the day, it's going to go to the committee for I think House Environment and Transportation, I think, for consideration there, and then possible crossover. That bill did need to get voted on by the Prince George's delegation, since it's a by-county bill, and I don't think they've taken it up yet. So if there's some steps, there's some things that are going to happen with the Office of the People's Council bill in MNC PPC. Liz, did you want to say anything? Anybody have any other issues on?
Yeah, Alan, I'm going to add some things because I think you
Right.
skipped the first step. When they gutted the People's Council bill, it actually asked for equity with Prince George's County, not with the same statute as Prince George's County has, but the duties that Senator Kramer laid out mirrored the duties in our current statute. They stripped out the committee stripped out the most important functions that we have of the People's Council, which is the ability to appear in public proceedings and advocate in the public interest. Also stripped out that it would be an attorney. And what they put in its place was largely the Friedson bill that came up last year to change the People's Council entirely into a technical clearinghouse with a non-attorney staff person. So it's sort of like a backdoor way of taking the Friedson bill and inserting it inside the place of the Kramer bill. And so that will also have to, the Senate will have to figure out what they want to do about that, whether they're going to try to approve in their delegation stripping out those amendments and endorsing the original version of the Kramer bill. That's what Senator Kramer is discussing with the other senators, whether there's any appetite for that, given the fact that it does not look like there's enough time this time for anything to pass. And some of us have spoken with Senator Kramer and advocated to him that we try to come out of this with the best votes possible. So I don't really know where that's going on the Senate side. But this terrible bill, I'm assured, is not going to pass. Peggy?
Thank you, Cheryl. Peggy Dennis.
Yes, I understand another aspect of the bill as amended, and I think it's major, would be to have the county council appoint the People's Council rather than the county executive. Correct me if I'm wrong, Cheryl.
No, that's correct. Senator Kramer's bill moved it to the county executive. It's currently under our current statute, if they were to fund it, is appointed by the county council anyway. So, but he wanted to move it over given the hostility that the council has to the position.
Thank you, Peggy. Thank you, Cheryl. I want to just bring back to your attention the governor's legislation, the housing affordability bill. Please pay attention to that. There is lots of interest in that bill. Yeah, so Genevieve is asking if there's a relationship between blocking affordable housing and People's Council. So, uh, when we could say,
Yeah, I
we,
mean, they
we,
really,
no, so no, so we can say that we've looked at it and we haven't seen any incidents where having a people's council as part of the government has restricted, has prohibited, slowed down any kind of affordable housing. Cheryl?
yeah, there's no mechanism in the Montgomery County statute or Senator Kramer's bill, or even the Prince George's County statute for a people's council to stop affordable housing. Does not have that power. They can identify issues in the public interest and stand up before the council and the planning board and advocate for that and advocate for the record to be complete. But there is no power to stop anything. I think that is a bit of, not a bit, a major piece of misinformation that has been put out by the Coalition for Smarter Growth and picked up by Andrew Friedson, who orchestrated the opposition to this. You know, we heard that repeated some in the committee considerations. Lily Chi brought up, well, the county has changed and we need more affordable housing. Jared Solomon made some reference to we need more housing. So the misinformation that somehow a people's council stops housing from being built has taken hold, and it's completely inaccurate. And I'll also add here that 5 counties in this state have a people's council. Some are much stronger statutes than ours, like Baltimore County. And, you know, we haven't even identified anywhere in the state where anyone has said people's councils get in the way of building housing, including in places where the people's council has more power and can go to court on behalf of residents. So that's a long answer, but it's a canard and really, I think kind of unethical that it's been spread around that way when the people who are saying it know that the People's Council has no power to stop anything.
So Genevieve, that was really, she gave the answer that I should have gave. So, well, we haven't seen the evidence and we'll be looking more closely and sharing that information from our research with the delegation. Anybody have anything else on land use and planning? I'm going to thank all the members of our committee for working so hard. We're all volunteers, and so I know this is extra effort. Ken Markison is out there. Thank you very much, Ken, for helping us on this. Our next committee is legislation, and we sort of talked about this. Peggy's been the chair of our legislation committee, but the legislation that we've been following most closely is the synthetic turf, the artificial turf, the People's Council, and the property rights. Peggy, do you have anything you want to add?
Well, yes, I do. I'm so glad that I now have a committee. Thank you, Cheryl and Sheldon Fishman, for joining me and bird dogging these important bills. I have one other bill, only one that's left to me to talk about, and that is HB 781, which is the rubber modified asphalt bill, requiring the State Highway Administration to use rubber, which I think means crumb rubber, just like is used in synthetic turf, mixing it into asphalt, which I think is a pretty bad idea. But as of this afternoon, I'm reliably informed that that bill has been amended to turn it, instead of a mandate to use it, a mandate to study the issue. Yay!
Thank you, Peggy. Next, I guess the P's go before the T's. So we have a committee which has no members on public finance. We have a committee with no real members for public safety. Does anybody want to say anything about public finance or public safety? I'll just raise the Dan, please go ahead, unmute. And
I testified in favor of the county council's bill 3-24, which is proposing to insist that hookah bars close at the same time all the other bars close in downtown Silver Spring, because police have shown that a lot of crime takes place between those late hours, and that costs the county a great deal of money and overtime and lost police resources when they have to babysit various streets in downtown Silver Spring when those crowds wander around and don't know what to do with themselves except to do unpleasant things to the community. So I saw in the county council agenda that on March 16th, it goes before some committee. I'm not sure how much time folks want to spend on that, but I hope that the bill passes. I think
Thank
would
you.
help everybody a lot.
Yeah, thank you, Dan. The impetus for that bill came from people in Silver Spring. That's a countywide bill, so require all establishments to close by 2:00 a.m. Sunday through Thursday. Up to 3:00 on the weekend. So it's an important bill, and we're looking forward to see if it has any impact on stopping some crime. As the police say, nothing good happens at 3:00 in the morning, and so we'd like to see a change there. Thank you, Dan. Anybody else on public safety? Okay, public finance. We heard a lot from Rich Madaleno about that. It'll be interesting to see whether or not the state legislature gives the counties this kind of authority that they want. There was an article today in Montgomery Perspective that suggested that maybe they won't do that. So that's an interesting article. And then the last committee is transportation. Jerry Garson, you have some things you want to share about that? And I just remembered now that the question I should have asked Rich Madaleno is where they were on the American Legion Bridge, because it seems to not be part of a conversation anymore. Jerry?
Well, I'll first comment on the American Legion Bridge since that's your question. From what I understand from State Highway Administration, it has less than 6 years useful life. That means probably within 5 years or so, they'll have to ban all trucks and buses and other heavy vehicles from using the American Legion Bridge, which should cause minor problems in all of DC. And since the eastern part of the Beltway is basically at capacity, both morning and afternoon rush hour, it's going to cause a major mess in the county. The next item I want to cover is the governor wants all vehicles sold in Maryland after 2035 to be either electric or plug-in hybrids. But the county will not permit building garages on single-family buildings that currently have carports or driveways in our neighborhood because of the zoning code side yard setback requirements. 220-volt current cannot be safely used within garages. Building anything but single-family units without garages will definitely be discouraged. So therefore, this whole plan on building apartment houses without any provision for plug-ins. The plug-in gets very complicated for apartment houses or condos because basically you either need shared units, but normally people don't want to move their cars after their car has been fully charged. We also see on the purple line that they claim now it'll be opened in late 2028. I think it'll be a couple of more years from that because they just can't do any major project on a timely basis. And there are major shortfalls to all funding of all transportation projects because the state claims they're out of money. Delegate Corman has proposed putting a surcharge on all Amazon purchases and all Uber and Lyft rides and taxi rides. But from what I've spoken to members of the state Senate, they're definitely opposed to any new tax increases. So good luck on solving some of our transportation problems. Rich commented on the whole thing with the railroad crossing at Montrose Road. And part of the problem is under state law, all crossings of railroads must be on state law, state highways, such as a numbered highway, such as 911, that only runs one block from Beers Mill to Rockville Pike, but it goes under the railroad tracks. When they originally built Montrose Parkway, it was supposed to be elevated, but in their infinite wisdom, they put it at grade. So therefore, you have the whole problem with up and down around the railroad tracks. But we've had numerous suicides on that. Whenever the railroad gates get stuck down, Randolph Road closes and makes a tremendous mess all over the area. And basically, the county wants to add 200,000 people without adding a single road or even eliminating a major bottleneck. Are there any questions on transportation?
I just want to correct you. So the news about the Purple Line is that the state authorities say the end of 27, and other people have said the beginning of 28. So not the end of 28 and 29, but the end of 27 and the beginning of 28. So since it was supposed to be completed in 22, that would be 5 years late and $5 billion over budget. So it's been a pain in the butt for those of us who live along the alignment. And I know lots of people would like to use the Capitol Crescent trail from Bethesda to Silver Spring. Paula, go ahead.
Sure, thanks. This might be kind of arcane, but Jerry or maybe Alan knows. More and more people in the county and in this area at least are driving these gigantic vehicles, much larger than we've had these new generations of cars. And in the parking garages and even surface parking lots on strip malls, the spaces are still narrow and the backing out is a problem. And it just seems like it's getting more and more dangerous for pedestrians who are getting out of their cars and walking in the parking lot, and just for the, backing out with these gigantic, like, I don't know what the other word is, these enormous vehicles. And I just wonder, is the planning department, when they're approving, parking lot spaces and so forth, requiring wider or longer spaces? Because it's more dangerous than it used to be.
Well, our park and planning department doesn't quite understand how vehicles and parking lots work. The only walkway that I'm aware of in Montgomery County between any part of a parking lot is in the Home Depot right near Montgomery Mall, where they have one lane that has a pedestrian walkway. All our parking lots should have pedestrian walkways, because once you get out of your car, you become a pedestrian. And the county has always wanted to maintain the slopes of parking lots. So if you go to the Giant by River Road, you'll discover it's on a major slant, and other parking lots are built like that. So therefore, the carts, you lose control, the carts crash into other vehicles. They just have no idea of how a parking lot should be built or how to particularly build it safely. And the whole problem, the parking requirements for many of these things were built when they had dress shops, men's shops, and other clothing type stores. Now, basically, every mini mall is basically restaurants and banks and other things. Well, the banks don't take up that many spots, but restaurants take up many more spots. And we see a lot of people continuously circling parking lots. They do occasionally kill pedestrians in parking lots, but somehow Vision Zero does not have any comprehension that once you leave your car in a parking lot, you become a pedestrian. We also have major problems with handicap parking. The rules that the federal government put in for handicap parking only require 2% of the parking spots in a mall or in any large area to be handicapped accessible. Yet, from the last I've read, anywhere between 11 and 12% nationwide of the people have handicap parking or handicap placards. They just never redo the laws or redo the regulations to update what's happening. We have a much older population in the county, in the state, in the nation than we ever had. And park and planning just has no idea that this has occurred.
So, Jerry, I don't believe that. But if you'd like to share some of your comments in an article for the newsletter for April, we would appreciate that. Dan, you have a question or comment?
I just have a comment. When I was growing up in the district, the DC government used to charge higher taxes for your registration on the larger cars, what we used to call American boats, to discourage people from driving these enormous cars. So I understand the frustration that people have with these monstrous SUVs, and I wondered if a tax structure like that might discourage people or encourage people to buy more modest vehicles.
I'll
Okay,
comment.
guys, all right, so we don't know, we're not subject matter experts in that. People are just offering their opinions right now. That's obviously a state taxing registration of vehicles is a state issue. So if we want to follow up with that, let's do it after some analysis, and so we can share that and talk about that. So thank you, Dan, for that comment. Thank you, Jerry, and thank you for Paula for talking about pedestrian safety. It is one of the sort of the leading issues of the Civic Federally over the last couple of years. That's it for our committees. I would remind the group that anybody can provide anything to the Civic Federation newsletter. Our deadline to our newsletter editor, Jackie Bocco, is the 26th of every month. So March 26th is the deadline. You write it, and unless it's obscene, we'll print it. And we hopefully will have we'll have useful information in the Civic Fed newsletter. I'd ask all of you who get our emails that Liz Joyce sends out with the link to the next meeting and the link to the newsletter that you'd share with your neighbors. So we write it so you could forward it to your neighbors so they have the benefit of the information too. And just wanted to remind you to do that. Anybody else have any final issues they want to bring? It's 9:50, so we've done a good job of filling up our 2.5 hours. Anybody have anything they'd like to share? Seeing none, entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Second.
I'm sure there's no discussion about that. Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you online. Check out our Facebook page for useful information between our meetings. Chris Reynolds, nice to see you with your trim over there. So you guys take care.
Good to see you.
Bye.